for the Community Foundation of Greater Muscatine. While I was in banking, Charlotte Schaefer, and thank you for taking time to be here today to discuss customer service. My background is primarily banking, and I spent most of my time in banking. I'm in the marketing and customer service of the retail side. Good morning. And then I spent some time after that at the local homeless shelter. And now I'm with the Community Foundation of Greater Muscatine. And again, I've had a little bit of opportunity to speak on customer service in the past. I love to talk about customer service. I'm excited you guys are here today. What's interesting is we've got both for-profit and nonprofit organizations and businesses in the room today. And there's no difference in the customer service needs of customers, clients, or donors. It's all the same. So it's kind of fun to have a different group here as we talk about these things. But everything that we talk about, it gets applied the same in all those different organizations. Now, we live in a world of like accelerating technology, right? So we have far fewer human interactions than we had even 20 years ago. And it makes us take our eye off the ball for customer service. Now, I'm going to ask you, what do you think one of the leading ways people that are 18 to 24 break up with their boyfriend and girlfriend? Through text, that's right. Now, for those of you that got married in that 18 to 24 range, I realize you're like, if it only been that easy back then, I probably wouldn't be married, but we're not going to solve that this morning. We're going to talk about customer service. So, what we know is we overlook opportunities. Because we have all this technology, we've become an unconnected, connected society, haven't we? And on top of it, compliance and regulation have taken an even bigger seat at our table. And so sometimes we set rules and expectations for our customers so that we can comply, that just makes it easier for us instead of us doing it, which makes our customer service less. And we have to stop and think about all those things, and we'll be touching on many of those things today. But what I want to start with is by showing you a video. Many of you have seen this video before. It's just one that plays on YouTube. I'll bring this over. This winter, didn't we? What do you think that video has to do with service? I'm sorry, teamwork? Absolutely. What else? Compassion. They had to care a little more, didn't they? Almost all those people could have not participated, and it still would have been okay, but they cared a little more, didn't they? They did it as a team. Honestly, some of those times they couldn't have done it without the team, right? It required all of them. What else?
Human kindness.
Human kindness. They cared a little bit more. They made a choice. They had to make that choice to be kind. Again, they all could have walked away and it wouldn't have been any different. Nobody would have thought less of them, but they chose. They chose to be an advocate for someone in need. Sometimes the people that needed them didn't even realize they needed them, right? So what's interesting is they made the person they served better, and often they made the people they served with better, didn't they? So quite simply, anytime we come in contact with someone, we either leave them better or worse. We never leave them the same. And when you stop and think of it that way, it's pretty powerful on a daily basis, the impact we have on people. Because when we walk away, I'm either going to leave you better or I'm going to leave you worse. And that's a decision we get to make, and it's a decision we get to make as service providers on how we're going to choose to do that. Service is quite simply a feeling you create. Right? That's just it. We're either going to make them feel better or we're going to make them feel worse. We're providing something along the way, just like they did in the video we watched. They provided. They served a need for them. And what I'm going to say is, again, the only difference is how we choose to deliver it. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about service in the next hour, and I'm going to tell you I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know, because service is simple. It is. But what we know is the more we focus on things, the better off we are, right? And that's why we're here to talk a little bit today. So let's talk about sizing up our competition. Who's our competition? Well, often if you're in banking, you think the other banks. Or if you're in a funder, you think the other funders. Or if you're a nonprofit, you think the other nonprofits, or whatever it might be. But actually, your competition is anyone that your client, customer, donor comes in contact with. Because it's not a silo. They're comparing you to every other service interaction they have, right? So if I go today and I run to the bank, and I stop at the grocery store, and I go on Amazon and I order something, and I run by and drop something off at Salvation Army, and tonight I stay at the Marriott, I'm comparing every one of those interactions, okay? So when I stand out, I have to be better than them to provide better service, but as we're going to see, service doesn't cost anything. It's a choice we make. So no matter what our organization is, we still have the ability to deliver outstanding service and wow folks. Now, we know that the moment of truth is anytime they come in contact with us. It's how we meet them, treat them, greet them. It's how our email comes across. It's how our rugs, how clean they are. It's how the delivery truck driver drives, right? Every one of those are an indication of your organization and how they feel about you. It's part of your brand. So we know that each of those customer touch points are critical. And that's why we're here today to kind of focus on some of that. Great service is about creating memorable feelings. Sister Irma, for some of you who know Sister Irma, she used to be the MCSA director. Some of you know her well. She used to say, don't forget to give them the dessert, right? Because we can provide the service, we can give them the meal, but what we need to do is give them that little extra at the end. The same thing we saw, the choice, the care, the little bit more. So we want to talk about how we give that dessert. How do we give continuous phenomenal service? And you're going to say, we do. And what we know is we don't. It ebbs and flows. This says, hello, I need some tech support. What's your tech support password? I don't have one. Well, then I can't help you. Since when do we require a password? Usually right before lunch, right? Doesn't it differ during the day sometimes? Doesn't our service ebb and flow? It does. And what we have to talk about is how to not have that occur. Now, we have to prevent the gaps. So there was a businessman, he got on a plane, and he's seated next to a parrot. And so the flight attendant comes around, and the flight attendant says, what would you like to drink? The parrot orders a scotch. The businessman orders a Coke. So quite a bit of time passes, and the flight attendant hasn't brought drinks, so the parrot squawks, where's my Coke, or where's my scotch? And so the flight attendant hustles over with both drinks. So a little bit later, the flight attendant comes back around. Again, the parrot orders a scotch, the businessman orders a Coke. And again, quite a bit of time passes. And so the parrot squawks loudly, where's my scotch? And now the businessman chimes in, where's my Coke? And the parrot says, service here stinks, And the businessman yells, "The service here stinks." Well, again, the flight attendant comes rushing up, this time grabs them both by the nape of the neck, assuming Parrot has a nap, grabs them both, opens the plane door, and throws them out. So they're hurtling toward ground, where the Parrot says to the businessman, "Wow, that took a lot of guts for a guy with no wings." So what we know is that we're going to assume the Parrot and the businessman were wrong. They were bad clients. They were bad customers, right? Who was bad was the flight attendant. She didn't give good service. Because what probably happened is she needed to go do other flight checks before they took off, or she needed to serve another section, or whatever it might be, but did she tell them that? So their expectation was going to come back quickly. She didn't communicate enough information for them to understand. And so we often focus on the clients, the customers, not the service that we provide and the gaps in those services. It's just like that. She had gaps in her service because she didn't explain well, and who paid for that were the clients. And who got talked about later were the poor clients on the plane, right? And we have to stop and kind of reflect on how do we close those gaps. Now, there was a man, and he showed up at a hotel. He was so tired. He'd missed his flights. He was clear behind. He'd got in late. He's standing at the front desk of the hotel, and he said, "I have to do a presentation." It's about 8 o'clock that night. He was supposed to be in hours beforehand. He said, "I have to do a presentation in the morning." And he said, "But my shoes need shine badly, and do you have shoe shining here at the hotel?" And the front desk person said, "As it turns out, we don't. However, I'm getting ready to leave pretty soon, and I could take those home with me. I could shine them, and I will be back at work tomorrow by 8 in the morning. Would that be a good resolution? Would you find that to be a positive resolution for you?" Well, absolutely. The businessman would be thrilled, right? Except that's not what happened. The front desk person says, "As it turns out, we don't. However, if you go down the block and around the corner, that hotel does have shoe shining services available." Now, if you look at that at face value, pretty good service. He gave options. They couldn't do it, but he gave an option, right? But what was memorable service? And really, honestly, how long does it take to shine a pair of shoes? But we don't think in those terms, right? We don't think in how we can even be better. And did it cost anything for him to take his shoes home? Maybe a little bit for the oil, I guess, but not really. And those are the things we have to talk about, how we stretch ourselves. So what's the big deal? And I'm going to count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You 10 are our customers. 10 customers, when they choose to leave your organization, business, whatever it is, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 leave because of customer attitude or employee attitudes. The other 3 die or something. I don't know what the other 3 do. But 7 leave because of customer or employee attitudes. That's a travesty. It's truly a travesty. It's free. And that's how we're losing donors, customers, clients. And it makes no sense because we can do a better job. You know, sometimes for a helping agency or a business where people actually need your services, it's okay because they need us. And honestly, if you think that way, you shouldn't be at that business or helping agency. It's just that quite simple. Because that's not why we're there. We're there to serve. We're there to advocate. And so what we have to stop and do is say, are we creating rules? Are we creating hoops for people to jump in that are unnecessary? And if we wouldn't expect our mom to go through that process, our clients shouldn't. And we need to erase those. But sometimes we can't erase the rules and the hoops. And so then we have to find a way to help them through it, to make it easier for our clients. It's not their job to do the work, it's ours, right? But sometimes we just get so busy, and we'll talk more about that, we kind of forget to look on how we erase the rules. If we were starting over today, would this process look the same? Often the answer is no. It's just we've done it that way for a really long time, and things change, and we forget to take a look, and we forget to reflect on who's having to do the work around, what our expectations are. So we're here to serve for all. Now let's talk about this. Bain & Company surveyed 362 companies, found 80% of those companies surveyed believed that their service they provided was indeed superior. Not satisfactory, superior. So what percent, when they went back and asked the customers, clients of those 362 companies, said that the service they were receiving was indeed superior?
10%.
10? 20? 8? We think we are so much better than we are at providing customer service. 8. Those companies thought they were superior, not satisfactory. and their clients 8%. And that was probably family. I don't know. So we have to start looking at things differently. Top 15 most powerful determinants of a hospital patient satisfaction. So let's talk about healthcare. That's my son, 17 years old. He was on the football field and he broke his leg. The top was going still south. The rest of his leg was going west, and we were headed to the University of Iowa for emergency surgery. We would have headed to the local hospital, but they didn't have an orthopedic surgeon on staff, so we were on the way to University of Iowa. This is what his leg looked like. It was broken so that it was not punctured through, but rubbing and blistering already on the skin. It was incredibly painful. So he's probably spent about 45 minutes on the football field stabilizing him. We spent about 30 minutes in the ambulance trying to get an IV in and get him stable. And then we spent at least an hour, because you have to drive slow, to Iowa City. And we got there. And we were talking, and the nurse is trying to get him pain medicine. And then I find out he hasn't had any. And as a mom, I'm like, I see my kids, football season's over, and not that he wasn't gonna be an amazing football player, he was a good one, but he enjoyed it. And you know, the kid's crushed, he's in an incredible amount of pain, and so in my mind, I'm thinking, how could they have not given him pain medicine? Because it reduces the trauma, from what little I know, and I may be wrong, of the injury, right? So, and it would help him. And so I start to say, oh my goodness, what happened was he was dehydrated and they couldn't get the IV in and they didn't give him anything orally. And I don't know if that was right or wrong, but I start to say, because I'm upset, like just about my son's situation. And my son stops me and says, Mom, it's okay, they were nice. Okay, he's in pain. And his comment was, it's okay, they were nice. So, top 15. Most powerful determinants of a hospital patient satisfaction were all related to the quality of patients' interaction with hospital staff. 0 had to do with health outcome. Now stop and think about that if you want to think about something. So you got sick people, and still the interaction they have with the people that are helping them is the most important thing to them. So think how powerful it is for your service that you're providing to people. I mean, they didn't even focus on the outcomes. Now, again, they have to focus on the outcomes to be served in the end, but their satisfaction levels were all about the people and the interaction. What we know is that we take for granted the service we provide. We really, really do. Now, I want you to look to your left with a huge smile on your face, and then look to your right with a huge smile on your face. Yeah, that smiling thing's hard not to do, isn't it? So who does this apply to? All this service talk, right? Well, it applies to both our external clients, customers, donors, and our internal folks we work with. Our volunteers, our teammates, our whoever it is, our collaborative partners. And sometimes we forget that. Because if we create a weak link by how we treat an internal customer, or kind of don't provide great service or don't give them what they need to provide the service to their final client, right? We've jeopardized the external service. And we've made kind of a crappy work environment, haven't we? Doesn't it? When somebody's not doing a great job? So what happens, let's stop and reflect. 60% of our work life is spent at work. So when we're working, 60% of our time is spent at work. So why would we want to create anything but something great, an environment that's great? So we have to stop and realize that our internal customers are just as important as our external customers. We don't get to take a break when we're providing that service. Abe Lincoln once said, I don't like that man very much. I need to get to know him better. And often that's all it takes to see the good, to see what we need to see in the people. We were blessed at MCSA, which is a local homeless shelter, because we didn't get to see people for a little bit of time. Often if they stayed with us, we got to spend a lot of time with them. And we got to know them very well. And sometimes they might be having some stress that came out in an interaction, but we got to see the whole picture of the person. And it was such a blessing. And as service providers, sometimes we only get a glimpse of that time. But internally, we can spend more time with people and get to know them better and provide better service. If the better customer relationships you give, you'll also get to spend more time with the other customers, because they're going to, as we'll talk in a minute, they're going to want to spend time from time to time getting to know you as well. My dad used to say, you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar. Quite simply, the better you treat somebody, the problems fall away. It's when we don't, and we'll talk about respect, it's when we don't give that we create our own problems and fires for our organization, for our sales opportunities, and for the folks we serve. Now, all organizations want to be great. They do. But the difference is what they tolerate that's not great. The difference is how much mediocrity they tolerate. So just because you want to be great doesn't mean you can. You have to have the expectations to meet that, and your internal and external customers do as well. So what is phenomenal service? We've been talking about, what do you think it is? Just going out of your way. Just taking an extra step, right? But what makes it uncommon? This is crazy, it's free. So what makes it uncommon?
It means that the focus is on you versus the...
You're focused on yourself and not the other party. So the shoe story could have been phenomenal, right? It was okay. And so often we focus back on ourselves. So what are the basic human needs our clients are looking for? Quite simply, friendliness. Now this one's as simple. When I went to a hotel once in St. Louis with my children and my husband, and we were going to go to a baseball game, and we got there, and it was, at the front desk, they gave us like bands that we had, like those hospital bands, if we were going to the pool, because the neighbor kids kept sneaking in. So we had to wear those to identify ourselves as hotel guests, which, if you stop and think about it, made no sense. They inconvenienced us to make their job easier. But anyway, so we get outside and it's hot. And the poor woman that gets assigned for, the duty to come check your pool passes is walking around. She gets to us, and I hadn't put them on the kid yet. They were still in my bag. So it's hot. She's sweating, and I'm digging, and she was remarkable. We were chatting about what we were there for and how old the kids were, and we had a lovely conversation while I find the passes, and she says thank you and goes on. So before we leave, what I realize is I haven't brought deodorant. Now, I have teenage children, teenage boys, and I'm not going to a Cardinal game in that heat without deodorant. So I go down to the gift shop, and it really was a beautiful gift shop. I'm not sure why we were staying at that hotel. I've never been in a beautiful gift shop, but they had even like silk ties stuff, right? And I walk in, it's air conditioned in there. And I said, would you happen to have any deodorant? And the person working at the desk said, and so I got up and I got it and I said, thank you, have a good day. Now, one of those people was truly not in the greatest working conditions, out in the heat, trying to hassle the clients, right? And the other one had a pretty good gig. One chose friendliness and one didn't. And it goes back to environment doesn't create your choice. Now, if you would stay at a Marriott, you'll fill out a survey, and it's going to be a survey of 1 to 5. So if you score anything less than a 5, they count that as a 0. Because what they know, satisfied is not good enough. You have to be excellent, or they're going to make a different choice. We have to think in those terms when we're thinking about service and what we're providing. Now, understanding, we're going to talk more about and empathy, but we clearly have to have that. We have to think beyond ourselves. We have to think past ourselves. Fairness. Everybody from a very early age understands fairness. Okay? And honestly, it feels the same as physical pain. But there was a little girl, she was 3, and she had a new baby sister. And the baby sister came home from the hospital with her mom and dad. And so the mom had gone in and was sitting on the couch nursing the baby when the 3-year-old walks in. And she looks at the baby, and she indignantly stomps her foot and says, she gets to drink in the living room? Right? At 3, fairness. It's not fair. We all feel that way, but we have to create fairness for our clients. They watch for that. They need that. Information. We live in an age now where I can get a ton of information before I ever arrive at your front door. So we have to know even more, be more educated, be able to provide more. Our stakes have been lifted, because I can get the other stuff. If I'm asking a question, I probably need elevated information. So we have to have job knowledge. Options and control. People want a choice in how things turn out, don't you? But we don't. You know what? We just kind of tell them what's going to happen sometimes. So there was a airplane sitting on the tarmac, and the weather was bad. And so the pilot came on and he said, you know what, we probably got about 20 minutes. We're waiting for the weather in Cincinnati. I'll update you as I have more information. About 20 minutes goes by. He said, hey, weather's still bad. It'll be about another 10 minutes and I'll get back to you. So back on again. You know, he's telling him what's going on. And then he comes on and he says, we have a 3-hour wait. He said, I want you to vote as the folks sitting on this plane. Do you want to sit on the tarmac and save our position because we'll be one of the first flights out when they finally lift? Or would you like to go back to the airport so that you can have more room and spend time there? So they voted. And they decided to stay because they wanted to get where they were going as soon as they could. Now that's a pretty rough day to sit 4 hours on the tarmac, isn't it? Sometimes the air's not very good on the plane. And so as everybody was getting off and the pilot was there to greet them, every one of them was thanking him. Why? Because the experience was different. He gave them information, he gave them options, and he let them have control. And often we don't give those things to the folks we work with. Now, another thing I want to remind you of when it comes to control is time. We have to be aware we live in an instant society. And so sometimes we think people may want to spend more time on something than they do. Errands, don't we try to cram those into a really short amount of time? And so I'm going to ask you a quick question. 2 women go to a home goods store like Bed Bath & Beyond. On average, how long do 2 women, they're out shopping together. How long do they spend?
At least
An hour?
At least.
Okay. On average, a woman with a man spends 4 minutes. And that's because the man, if it's my husband, is sitting like in a fetal position out front of the bench, right? He doesn't even get it because he doesn't want to shop at the Bed Bath & Beyond. And he doesn't want me spending any money. A woman alone, on average, spends 5 minutes. With children, 7, and a woman with a female companion spends 8. We overestimate how long people allot to the things they need to accomplish. And so we affect them negatively. If they come in thinking it's going to take 10 and it takes a half hour, but what would be different if it's going to take a half hour? How could you make that a better experience? By letting them know, is this a good time for you to do that? But often we don't. We start marching into it, right? And then a half hour later, they're like, I'm behind. Okay, so we have to stop and we have to think a little bit about time. As a rule of thumb, younger customers speed it up buttercup, and older folks often have a little bit more time. But service is hard because it's a moving target. Now, are you going to treat the people on these pictures all the same? No. The people on the bottom actually are my parents. So if you gave a brochure to them, my mom would have read it twice before dinner. If you give a brochure to someone that has 4-month-old twins, they might read it when they graduate, right? What we know is we have to provide different service. What we also know is we all have to do it differently. And that's like, well, that's too hard. I'm just going to give it the same. But we don't. We know inherently how to do this because we do it every day with our friends, family, and the people we work with. We treat people differently based on their needs. We can't do boilerplate. And so, for instance, and I will say, if you give somebody a brochure, please know that that's just a tool. You're the one that's supposed to be providing the information. So when you say, I gave them a brochure, that's not satisfactory service. Getting them information and letting them take that home as a support is. But what we know is we treat people differently. It's a basic human needs that we talked about a minute ago are all the same. And often, sometimes you kind of have to feel your way through by asking questions to see what they want, right? So I want you to stop and think about somebody you knew in high school that you haven't seen for a really long time. So I'll give you a second. Got it? Saw it, somebody? Okay, I want you to picture this. You're walking on one side of 2nd Street, and you see them across 2nd Street on the other side of the street. Okay? What do you look like? How do you see yourself when you see that person? Excited? Yeah. Your eyebrows are up, right? Big smile on your face. What do? You go across the street and you ask them something you remember from the last time you talked to them or the last thing you knew about them on Facebook or whatever it might be, right? So what would be different if we could show that level of excitement and spirit for our customers? That we were truly excited to see them. Would that not change the service we provide? Think about how different you look when you saw that person. Huge smile, super excited. And we're going to talk a little bit about enthusiasm. So what do customers hate? And you guys could have done this list for me. Failing to acknowledge the customer who walks in. Oh, we're pretty good about that. No, you're not. Honestly, we think we're good, but we're not. So I worked with a bank once, and they did mystery shopping, and they had an empty branch, and the client came in and waited 4 minutes for service because they were busy working on stuff, and they didn't acknowledge them, okay? So we think we are, but it's because we're not paying attention. Do you like to not be acknowledged? Don't you like to be welcomed? Not necessarily hounded, just welcomed. Yeah, okay. Forgetting to use a customer's name. So they did a study, and when they were friendly to and used the milk cow's name, milk production went up 258 liters a year when they used a cow's name. So if that happens with a cow, what do you think it does for humans? We appreciate when people know our names. We appreciate when we're greeted. The avoiding eye contact. Do you trust people that avoid eye contact? Do you trust people wearing sunglasses when you can't see their eyes? So what I want you to do is look at the person next to you, and I want you to talk to them, tell them something about yourself, but I want you to figure out what color eyes they have. Don't tell me, just do it, just look. It's a different conversation when you're paying attention to people's eyes, isn't it? Are you more engaged? I'll tell you, I pretty much a lot of days could go all day and not know because I'm not paying attention. Something else is diverting. I'm trying to get through the process, whatever it might be. But think about the difference in that and talking to someone who's not making eye contact. Asking customers for information more than once. Who hates that? Right? Do you care about me if I have to tell you more than once? And if you're on the phone, let the person know you're taking notes. Say, thank you, I'm just jotting down some notes while we talk. Because all of a sudden they realize that you respect the conversation, you're showing respect for them, the caring goes up. So if I'm in the doctor's office and I'm telling them about what's wrong with me, and nobody's taking notes, how does it make you feel? You're sick. How does it make you feel? Yeah, not very comfortable at all, right? So we need to make sure people, and I'll also tell you, when you transfer somebody to somebody else and don't give them that information and they have to repeat it all again, don't you get tired of that? Or they enter it into a system and you can tell because they're telling you, oh, I gotta wait for the computer. And then you have to tell them again? Does that make any sense? Now, if I have to do that because the system says that, I probably, before I transfer them, would say, I've got this information in, now based on the systems we have, they may need to enter some information again and you may need to repeat it or whatever it might be, but explain that to them because it's aggravating. You're wasting my time. When you make mistakes, apologize. Lawsuits go down when you apologize. People just don't like it when you won't admit you're wrong. And when you do something wrong, honestly, when you fix it and fix it well, they're more loyal than they ever were. And ask them what they want to fix it. It's often less than you think it's going to be. People are reasonable. Everybody knows people make mistakes. But ask. If we had a little bit more time, I could tell you a really interesting story about where somebody thought it was going to cost thousands and it cost about $20 because they asked. Organization. Now, I've got sloppy personal appearance, but I want to focus a little bit also on office appearance. If your desk, it looks like a hurricane hit, I don't trust you to take care of my stuff, okay? If I go into a place where they take care of me and the fish are dead in the fish tank, I'm not going to think you're going to take care of me. So it's the little details, the little touch points that make phenomenal service. And when we overlook those, it makes a difference to the person. Everything we're doing is about creating feelings. If you don't take my notes, or if you don't write down what I'm saying, you've left me worse, right? So kind of think about it on that level. Now, when talking to a friend or coworker while you're supposed to be waiting on me, that ever happen? Yeah. I stood at a convenience store once, I don't remember what I was trying to buy, while the person finished telling her coworker about her getting her tubes tied. I didn't care. I didn't. And I tell you something else, when I left, she'll still have time to talk to her coworker. When we're there to be taken care of, aren't we? We're there to be focused on. I don't need that side distraction, and you're going to get to see your coworker again. It's going to happen. Or you can text or call them. But the conversations have to stop. And sometimes we kind of forget that. Complaining about the process, complaining about your day or the process to get things done. We love to do this to our clients. Our clients don't care. You know what? They're there for a service. And when I say to you, oh, it's going to be really difficult to get that done because Stephanie didn't show up today, I think your organization's bad. And now I got to decide whether or not I want to continue to work with your organization. I don't need to hear what's going wrong in your organization. I just need what I'm asking for service, right? Those things are for your internal team to solve, not to share with the client. And there's an old saying, I don't need to hear the details of the baby's birth. I just want to see the baby picture. And as service providers, we just want to give them what they need to see, right? I don't need to hear all the background. I don't need to know how difficult it was for you to provide that to me. I need the service. And often we get back to the point, we get focused on ourselves and we forget. And we share that. So service was relationship building, and as we talked about, it all boils down to attitude. Now, people read sincerity. 85% of our communication is nonverbal. It's not what we say, it's how we say it. Have you ever asked a teenager and they say they're fine, but you know they're not fine, right? We know that. So I worked with a bank once and doing some service provider or customer service conversation. They had a teller who had a client that in the second drive-through was so angry they took the tube and they launched it across the first drive-through and hit the window of the walk-up, right? Now first, if you know anything about bank drive-through, you got to be pretty athletic to either, I don't know if they're left-handed or right-handed, to actually manage to hit the window. So I think they're pretty athletic. But so they talked to the teller, and the teller said what they said. And they're like, I don't know why they're mad. It must have been a bad day. And then the teller told the story again, only this time she was getting more animated, which was exactly how she delivered it to the client. And they said they would have thrown the tube as well. It wasn't what she said, it's how she said it. So often when you're working with another provider and they say, this is all I said, yeah, we get that, but how did you say it? Because that's what makes the difference. Action rings louder than words. Positive action leads to positive reaction, negative action leads to negative reaction. If you are always complaining how the customers treat you, you're probably giving it in some way. If you have a coworker that's always complaining, they're probably giving it in some way, because we get what we give. When we give positive, we get positive. When we give negative, we get negative. Now, studies show that your people at your work impact the people at your spouse's work. Because you go home tonight and you crab, and then you get up in the morning and you're like, I don't want to see so-and-so again, right? And then your husband or wife or spouse or whoever it is heads off to work, what, a little less happy? And then they take that into their workplace. Attitudes are completely contagious. And we see it in the workplace all the time. Now I'm going to tell you a story about my attitude hero. My Aunt Doris is 94 years old. She was 4'10", she's probably 4'8". She's never bought her shoes any place but the children's section. I mean, she's just the most wonderful little lady you'd ever meet. She's had a lifetime of tragedy. She's lost person after person and really in odd ways, and it's been hard. And she's got the greatest attitude of anyone I know. So just a few years ago, she was probably in her late 80s, maybe early 90s. She had a great-granddaughter live with her while she was going to college, while her granddaughter was. And she was driving home from work one night, and it was raining, and she drove into water, and the car submerged. So she called her brother, and her brother wasn't in the area, so we had her call the sheriff. And they called the sheriff, and the sheriff came, but by the time they found her, she had drowned. Now, she was 23 years old. She was less than a mile from home, and she was gone. So I said to my Aunt Doris, you know, how do you express your sympathy over something like that? But Doris said to me, at least she didn't leave small children. And I think I looked at her oddly, because she's going through all this true darkness, and she says, at least she didn't leave small children. And at 23, she certainly could have. And then Doris said, Charla, it's never as bad as it couldn't be worse. And what I realized at that moment is the way that she has managed to get through this difficult life of loss is she gets up every morning and finds somehow the positive. It's never as bad as it couldn't be worse. She somehow manages to find her way. And if we could all be like Doris, if you'd meet her, she's tremendous. But she knows that the positive attitude is what's going to carry us through. And if we can all be a little bit more like Doris, and if we can all provide our service a little bit more like Doris. And I'll tell you, I don't come close to my Aunt Doris, but I hope to continue to try to improve because she's amazing. Now, I will tell you that positive does equal positive, and I'm going to just kind of change course a little bit. So it's about 20 till 10. You're probably going to be at the bar at noon, or maybe sooner because you're at this presentation. So if you go to the bar, studies show that if you smile more at the bartender, they'll pour more beer in your glass. So you can take that back. If you get nothing else, you might want to write that one down. That's what you learn today. Positive leads to positive. Nixon was defeated in the 1960 presidential campaign. He didn't smile a great deal during the campaign. Of course, Kennedy was perceived relaxed and personable. Nixon won the second try for Oval Office and was rarely photographed during his second campaign without a smile. Now, this particular debate, the people that watched it on TV and reported on it said Kennedy clearly won. My mother-in-law actually listened to this debate on the radio. She couldn't see the smiling faces. She said Nixon clearly won. We are changed by seeing people that we like and that seem happy. And we follow that, right? We want to be around people that are happy. So the difference is when we put a smile on our face, smiling literally makes you feel better physiologically. When you smile, you feel better. You can just do it and you'll see it, and it happens, and we don't do it enough, and we're going to talk about that. But we get focused on the day-to-day stuff. 40% of all your day is habits, according to a Duke study. So when we get in the habit, what do we forget to do? Engage the client, engage the customer, engage the person. And so we have to pull ourselves out of that to provide great service. Now, earlier you guys were all smiling at each other, and what happened? You smiled back. It's the simplest way to start great customer service and build a relationship. Sometimes we don't communicate well. We talked a little bit about that. Word choice does matter. There was a young lady, and she needed to raise money for college. She was going door to door, trying to just get odd jobs, and she stopped at. She was in a affluent neighborhood. And she stopped at one, and he said, you know what, my porch needs painted. Yeah, I'll pay you $50 to paint my porch. Oh, certainly. So she's back fairly quick because it's a big porch, and so she adds, I'm done, and there was paint left, so I painted twice. Kind of impressed. Anyway, she then adds, it's not a porch, it's a Ferrari. Right? She thought it was a car. He wanted his porch painted. So what we do is often how we communicate creates a conflict. Right? So we have to be better about how we communicate and what words we choose. I'm going to tell you, we cause a frustration a lot. When we tell a customer, I don't know, without adding what you're going to do about it, they hear, I don't care. When we say, you don't understand, they hear because you're stupid. Because if you explained it well, they would understand, right? When you say you have to, it sounds like because you're not important enough for me to help you. Oh, I'll have to tell John I pulled that off. My husband, I pulled that off without him. We're back on? Yeah, okay, I knocked it.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Okay, thank you. When you say you'll have to wait without giving a little explanation, it says because you're not worth my time right now. You were misinformed. Somebody lied to you is what you hear. Now, I called one time about plane tickets, and I was talking to the person. They said, yeah, you can use those. I had some vouchers. You can use those on that day the way you want to use them. I'm like, great, I got to talk to my husband. I'll call back tomorrow. I call back tomorrow. I said, I want to use the tickets on this day, like blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, you can't. I said, well, I just talked to somebody yesterday. They said I could. And they said, but you can't. And I said, then why would they have told me that? And they said, probably because it made you happy and got you off the phone. We do, that people get lied to. So when they hear you were misinformed, it may not have been what happened, but that's what they hear. So you've got to provide, and you've got to give a better answer. Apple, instead of saying, do you have questions, you say, what questions do you have? It opens a conversation, doesn't it? That one change. Instead of saying, unfortunately, which is negative, you say, as it turns out. Doesn't that sound better? So let's take a look at this. I want you to look at that and try as quickly as you can in your mind just to do 4-word grammatically correct sentences. Okay, I'm going to stop you because we don't have a lot of time. This test is really just a test, and in it there's a lot of words like old and worried and gray. And when you do this test with someone, the speed they walk in, it's slower as they walk out because you actually make them think of the state of being old. The words we choose impacts the people we serve. The more positive words we choose, the more pleasant words we choose, the happier, the more quickly that they're going to be energized, and we have to stop and think about those things. You spend a lot of time on the phone. It's more important than ever. 85% of all people have one with them. It's probably in many cases the only live interaction you may get a chance to have with them, right? So let's look at this. I want you to watch the intersection. This is Josh Koppel. He was an Iowa football player. And just watch quick. Oh, Josh got hit by a truck. So when he was being interviewed by Matt Lauer, he said, I got hit by the truck. I rolled over and picked up my phone. So if we don't think phone service and people's interest in using their phones is more critical than ever. This kid got hit by a truck, and the first thing he worried about was his phone. We have to wow people on the phone. Whoops. 3 things that people hear on the phone is your word choice, your tone of voice, and their imagination, right? Because they can't see you. So how do you feel when the phone rings? Are you always delighted? No. They need to think you are, though, don't they? That's right. And so we'll talk about that. So we have to answer the phone or rings. Like really, you got to answer the phone. You got to check your voicemail. Now I want you to go like this. I want you to go like that, and then like that. There's your phone. Now I want you to kind of slump over. It's been a long day. Not smile and answer the phone the way you typically do at work. Just go ahead, out loud, like we want to hear you. Okay, now I want you to stand up. I want you to go ahead and stand up. To keep your phone. I want you to put a smile on your face. And I want you to answer the phone. Same way. The same greeting, but now go ahead and with a smile on your face, say it. Good morning. Good morning. All right, what sounded better? Smiling. And when you stand, sit up straight when you're answering the phone. Your lungs have room. You're more enthusiastic. It sounded completely different in here once you stood than when you. But what do? We pick up the phone. They hear that. You have to smile. Go ahead and have a seat. You have to smile when you're on the phone. Just from a time perspective, I'm not going to do this today, but typically what I do is I do a weight test. So I have you close your eyes, because if you put somebody on hold, it feels 2.5 times longer than it really is. So I have you close your eyes and open them when you think a minute's up. I also usually try to take things out of your purse, but I actually have money today, so we're not going to do the test. So what happens is people's eyes start popping at 15 seconds. Okay? And we think it's okay to put them on the phone for a long time, don't we? So 2 things. Ask before you put someone on hold. And second, realize there's a lot of people that have minutes on their phone. And while you're making them wait, they may not have any minutes when you get done. I've watched people sob because they're out of minutes and they have a job call coming in. So you need to be mindful of the place and position you put people. Let's say no blind transfers. And what this means is, like, when you're calling, if you can call and let the person know what's going on instead of just passing them off without getting information. I like to say this. If you're at a bar tonight and someone near you has had too many cocktails and you offer to take them home, do you ask a few vague questions and then drop them off where you think they live? Or do you ask enough information to get them home? You ask enough information to get them home, right? But when it comes as a phone call, what do? We ask a couple questions and we pass them off and hope the next person takes care of them. It's the same thing. We got to get them home. So you've got to stop and you've got to ask enough questions to get them home. Ask for their business if you're a business. Voicemail. Make sure you're checking your voicemail. It's not something you check 3 days from now. People are leaving a message because they want responsiveness. Always have positive words and tone. Email we're going to go through fairly quickly. It is a formal business contact. We're so used to all the different ways that we talk to people, we kind of forget. Don't use emoticons in business email or organization email unless it's somebody close to you. Don't keep your cap locks on. It looks like you're being aggressive. There was one man fired because he wouldn't quit putting his cap locks on, and they said it was aggressive business. It wasn't sending the right signal. Be brief. 140 character Twitter, right? People don't want to read a lot. It's your job to make it concise. It's your job to use pronouns that are concrete. You know how you, all of a sudden it's he and she and you can't even follow it? You got to kind of think through that as because the person receiving it doesn't know the story. The subject line, say what it's about. Don't use an old email because now I'm going to say, oh, I know what that's about, and I may not check it till tomorrow, and you needed to check today. So be mindful. If the conversation's positive or negative, you need to pick up the phone. Email is for neutral information. We so often try to do apologies and tell great news and neutral information. There was somebody that said, if email would have come before phones, we would have gone, oh my gosh, I can talk to people, and we all would have wanted to use the phone, right? So we have to be aware of that. If the person sitting next to you, get up and talk to them. So I had once when I was working at an organization where somebody was like sitting 6 feet from each other, and they sent like a snarky one-line email to the person sitting here. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's not what email is for. You know, get up and talk to people. Okay, quite simply, are you worthy of respect? You personally, are you worthy of respect? Yep, everybody is. This is Warren and Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. At the time that picture was taken, they had $162 billion. They look like it? Don't judge people. Don't judge. Everybody deserves respect. We say we do it, we don't. Top 10 reasons Texas A&M put them together with service complaints, all rooted in the lack of respect for clients. We say we do it, we don't. We have to remember the running into a friend on the street. If we all did that, that would be respectful. I was working at 19 years old, tell her place is full on a Friday afternoon, everybody's cashing their checks, I'm running 2 lanes. Man comes in, he talks to us a lot, he's a talker, he enjoys coming to the bank, and I can't hear him, and he's talking, and I'm shaking my head, and he leaves. And I'm putting the tube, because I'm still taking care of service. And the manager slaps her hand down and she said, did you hear what he said? And I said, no. His wife died. I didn't give him respect. Now, I learned a lot from that. And of course, as it turns out, I don't think he heard me over, and I apologize, but I didn't give him respect. So it's easy. I could have easily said, oh, it's really busy. Can we talk a little bit? I could have given him options, but I didn't give him respect. Sometimes the day has not gone the way the person hoped, right? They're having a bad day. Health, money, who knows? I read something recently. When you bump a cup, somebody's holding a cup. If it's coffee in it, the coffee comes out. If it's tea in it, the tea comes out. And it's the same for people. If they're having a bad day and we don't give them good service and we bump them, what comes out? Whatever's inside, right? And we have to be aware of trying not to bump our clients to begin with. But we also have to be aware sometimes their day's not going as they expect. There was a helping agency, and they had a long line of people every morning, and the people that came in had to have certain paperwork. And so sometimes that person would be up waiting, and they get there, and 30 minutes later, and they find out they didn't have the right paperwork. And so they're like, well, the client, they should know better, right? What they did instead is said, this is our fault. 7 o'clock in the morning when the doors would open, they'd go out and they'd go through the whole line and make sure everybody had all the right paperwork. And if they didn't, they could go home. So whose responsibility is it to make sure they're having an okay day? It's yours. And we need to stop and think. Most of the time when something's going wrong, we probably impacted it in some way. Now, sometimes it's easier to fight with you than go home and tell your spouse something they don't want to hear. Unfortunately, that's a fact. There was a man in Pennsylvania who came in with a BB gun, rob a bank. He said, I'm here, call the police. He's got the gun pointed at him. The police come. He said, I don't want to go home to my wife. They put him away for like 3 to 6 years. His wife, it wasn't a good experience. No, sometimes why people aren't being reasonable, maybe that they've got other things going on in their life you can't see. And sometimes people look like they don't have other things going on in their life, but they do. So we have to be empathetic. We can't judge. We have to say, how do we make this the best experience we possibly can, and try not to bump them. If you were looking to only serve people that were perfect, or hang out with people that are perfect, your social circuit, your business, they're impoverished, right? There'd be no one there. And you need to keep that in mind, because sometimes we judge people we don't know a little more harshly than the ones we do too, right? If I get to know them better. Now, I want to summarize. Respect. We've talked a lot about respect. I'm going to go to stand and shake hands. So if you were at your house and you're sitting on the couch and somebody knocks at the front door, do you holler out, hey, come in, or do you get up and you walk to the door and you welcome them? Yeah, but we don't do that with our clients. We don't even stand up for our clients. That's crazy. We know to do that. We don't go, hey, Bill, come on. We might if it's our kid. We probably have the door locked if it's our kid, but that's not even the point. So if they're not important enough for you to get up and stand up, what's that say? Acknowledge quickly and smile. 30%, a whopping 30% of all perspective about your service is your greeting. Phone, in person, 30% is how they feel about you. Go ahead, whoops, we're going to go this way. Introduce and use name, ask how you can help, maintain eye contact, we talked about that. Listen, MIT did a study, and they did a study and said, what are the most likely things that we can tell that an interaction is going to end in a customer sale? So success. And this is whether you're making a sale or not. It had nothing to do with the words people chose. Two things. One, the ratio of how much the person listened to spoke. So how much the provider, the service provider, listened, the higher it was, compared to how much they spoke. Because the other person's getting a chance or asking questions, right? And the second, how enthusiastic the person was, the service provider was in their response. So enthusiasm and listening is what creates success. And stop and think about that when you're working with your clients. How many of you, are you enthusiastic? Are you listening? Or are we trying to move through the process? Focus on what you can do, not what you can't. So often we just say no. Find a way to say yes. I grew up in a retail store. My dad owned a men's clothing store. And honestly, if you walked in and we didn't have it, we found who did. Or we found how we could get it. You didn't walk out until, it didn't even matter if it had anything to do with us. We found the yes for you. If you call, as a banker, and the bankers all know this, if you come in and you need a loan and they can't give it to you, they'll say at this time, but what they're going to say is if you do this and this and this, we'll be able to provide that loan for you. They don't say no. They tell you what they can do. And so what your job is not to say no, not to let the folks you work with say no, but look for the options, look for the answers, and then they're going to think more of you because it shows personal respect. Use positive words. How often do we hear certainly, absolutely, my pleasure, and you're welcome anymore? Don't you kind of even think about it when somebody says my pleasure? Don't you go, oh, that was nice? Is that crazy? Don't say no problem, because no problem means you're not a problem today, but you could be a problem. Talk on how you can use positive words. Ask your customer, thank and inquire, ask them how you can leave them better. Is there anything else I can do for you? Open the door, because they may think the world of you. And then when you give them a chance, they may ask you something that's really important for them, okay? So what I want to do next is I want you in your envelope, we're just going to take a couple minutes, I want you to take a sheet of paper, I want you to write down 2 things that you're going to work on for your organization in the next month. I want you to put it in the envelope and put your address on it. I'm going to stamp them and I'm going to send them back to you in a month. And then we'll close right after that. 2 things that you're going to work on or have your organization work on in the next month. Or maybe one of both. No, it's always good to make somebody else do it. No, I'm kidding. Maybe one of both. And just put your address on it, and we'll get it. We'll send it to you in a month, and then you can see how you're doing. You don't have a pen?
Envelope.
Oh, you don't have an envelope? Let me get you one. We need a couple envelopes. Okay. Okay. Can you pass those back? I can't get there without breaking the mic. It looks like. Kim Warren just wrote, "I'm amazing." I'll send that back to you. You'll feel good about yourself in a month, too. I'm kidding. You didn't write that. Maybe you did. Can somebody look at Kim's and see if she wrote that?
Nah, yeah, she did.
While you're doing that, and before you leave, there's also a note if you want to give feedback on today's session or the other sessions or thoughts on anything along that, you can certainly leave that as well. And when you leave, I'll just ask that we'll pile them up on that corner. I'll give you another minute or so, and then I want to tell one last story. Did you not get a folder? There we go. Well, you're probably trying to figure out where the paper's coming from. Okay. At the Seattle Special Olympics, 9 contestants, all physically or mentally disabled, assembled at a starting line for the 100-yard dash. At the gun, they all started out, not exactly in a dash, but with a relish to run the race, to finish, and to win. All that is except one little boy who stumbled on the asphalt, tumbled over a couple of times, and began to cry. They slowed down and looked back. Then they all turned around and went back, every single one of them. One girl with Down syndrome bent down and kissed him and said, "This will make it better." Then all 9 linked arms and walked together to the finish line. Everyone in the stadium stood, and the cheering went on for several minutes. People are still telling the story, and why? Because what we know deep down, we know this one thing. What matters in life is helping others win. As service providers, I thank you for the work you do every single day, helping others win. It's really, really powerful work. I think sometimes we don't give the respect to our own work that we really are having on the lives of those around us. So thank you for helping others win. Thank you for taking time to come today and talk a little bit more about customer service, and I hope you have a great day.